It was supposed to be Idris Elba. Hello everyone, this is Gene from NYC again, and I'm back with another video. As always, thank you so much for taking time out to listen to my videos, to like, to subscribe, to view, to leave comments. I enjoy all of the interaction, and again, thank you so much to everyone. My subscriber count keeps growing. And it's all thanks to you, dear viewers, so thank you so much. So, as you may or may not have heard, I'm leaning on the side that you're probably somewhat familiar with this. Actress Lashana Lynch, who I think her biggest role to date is being cast as Maria Rambeau in the Captain Marvel film from a few months ago, has been cast as the new 007. For the next upcoming James Bond film, and this has got the internet quite in a tizzy. And I have many thoughts and opinions on different topics about this and what it means. So this is going to get a bit rambly. It's probably going to be a bit long. So grab your popcorn and strap in. So first, the idea of a black 007, right? Because she's not James Bond, right? She isn't actually playing James Bond, right? From what I've read in some articles, she's taking over his code name because there's a period in the film where he's retired, so she's taken up his name. First of all, let's be honest. 007 is James Bond's name. It's just another variation of his name. That code name, that code number, I should say, has become so synonymous with him that you can't think of anybody else but him. It would be like putting, it would be like a basketball player playing on the Chicago Bulls wearing number 23. Everybody knows who number 23 on the Chicago Bulls is, and for anybody else to wear his jersey, for anybody else to wear Michael Jordan's jersey after him, is just to stand in his shadow and to try to take his name, and that would not be well received. And I think a big reason why this is being controversial is because while it's technically just his code number, same way a jersey number is technically just a number, and technically anybody can wear it, these numbers become so synonymous with a particular person that again, it just becomes, their name. Michael Jordan is number 23 on the Chicago Bulls. You can try to rationalize it and reason that, well, it's just a jersey number. He's retired. Anybody can wear it. No, it's retired for a reason. Because that number became synonymous with him. It became, in a way, an extension of him. No one else is ever going to see anybody but Michael Jordan as number 23 of the Chicago Bulls. I mean, he was so iconic to that number that when he finally retired it and hung it up for good, that it was briefly considered in the NBA to retire 23 across the board, although ultimately that didn't happen. Although the Miami Heat actually would retire the number in honor of Michael Jordan's contributions to basketball. And I remember when LeBron James came into the NBA and he was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers, he was criticized by basketball fans and pundits and whatnot for wearing number 23. Because again, even though he wasn't playing on the Bulls, to wear number 23 is to wear Jordan's number, and is to say you're the best, right? That you are on his level, and he was criticized for that. If I remember correctly, Jordan had to come out and say that he had no issue with it personally. So that's how iconic a number or a designation can become to a particular person. And just like Michael Jordan's number 23, or rather I should say, just as number 23 is synonymous with Michael Jordan, 007, the number, right, is synonymous with James Bond. You really can't have a person who is not James Bond with that number. They could have casted a white man in this role and had his name be, John Smith, right? No one's going to buy 007 as John Smith, right? It just doesn't work. 007 is James Bond. That number is always going to be associated with him, and I think that if he were real, that again, given that it is so synonymous with him and so iconic to him, that if it were real, MI6 would probably retire the number with him. Another thing is that 007, of course, in the greater scheme of things, is a branding tool, right? It tells you which franchise this is, right? It's the logo for the James Bond franchise. All you have to do is just slap it on something, slap it on a poster, and people will know. Oh, this is related to the James Bond franchise, and the logo, of course, since it's associated with the James Bond franchise, it gives people an idea of what type of film they're going to expect, right? They're going to expect an action film. They're going to expect explosions. They're going to expect love scenes. They're going to expect exotic locales and, beautifully dressed men and women, right? There's a certain aesthetic, right, associated with it. So again, even from a larger branding perspective, it still represents James Bond. And James Bond, the character himself, right, is a white man. And you're never going to be able to erase that, right? I remember hearing that, people were considering a black Bond and that they wanted Idris Elba, which I actually do agree with. It's funny. It's like I don't like the idea of race lifting in general, but it's like 9 times out of 10 I'm against it, but that would have been the one time that I would have said okay, because again, Idris Elba is an amazing actor. I've seen some of his work. He can do drama, he can do comedy, he can do action. He looks good in a suit. He has that, classically masculine, debonair look. He looks like he could play a character like James Bond. And while certainly his casting would have caused controversy, casting anybody to play James Bond is going to cause controversy. And when you race lift, which even with Idris Elba would still be a race lift, and that would still cause controversy. But I think with him, again, it would have been it still would cause controversy, but it would be an easier pill to swallow because, again, he's a well-known, well-respected actor. He does look, I can't necessarily say he looks the part, but he does have that aesthetic, right? He has that classically masculine, debonair look to him to play a character like James Bond. He's a bit older, he isn't, this boy band looking fresh-faced 20-year-old, right? He does have a little bit of age and experience to him. He has that, handsome older gentleman look about him. So again, I think that if they wanted this to actually be better received, it would have been better to cast him. He's the bigger name. People know him more. But what's done is done. But no matter what you do, right, you will never be able to separate or disassociate James Bond, who is a man, who will always be a man, James Bond, from 007. So there's that. So there's the first thing. The second thing is that I think that if they had wanted to introduce a female spy, they first of all should have given her own number, right? She can be 008, she can be 004 or whatever it is. And just can't turn back the past now, but if they truly wanted to introduce her and have her, how do I explain it? Right? Because I think another issue with this is that this new character, right, is unknown to the fans, right? A lot of the characters in the James Bond films have been in the films for a long time, right? M, Q, Bond himself, Moneypenny, right? All these characters, and so as the movies go on, people get to know them, people get familiar with them, people have their favorite version or their favorite iteration of that character. The problem with this is that this is, and again, this would be the case even if it was a man, even if it was a white man. This is a character they are now shoehorning into the series under Bond's number, sight unseen. Fans, at least I haven't read anything about this character having any sort of history with the film. She's brand new. Fans don't like brand new. When you're dealing with a franchise like James Bond, as long as it's been around, fans are not looking for brand new. Fans are looking for what they are familiar with, right? They want the old, they want the roles, they want the characters, if possible, they want the actors that they are most familiar with. Shoehorning this character in sight unseen, I think is part of the reason why there's such a controversy. Right? I think that if they had introduced the character maybe a film or two ago, again, you can't change the past, but I think if they had introduced the character a film or two ago, have her be Bond's apprentice, have him mentor her, and then you have this film where he's retired, fans of the series would at the very least be somewhat familiar with her, and again, wouldn't be such a bitter pill to swallow. This was always going to be a controversial move no matter what, but again, had there been a little bit of foresight, you would at least have a character that the fans are familiar with, so her moving into his role, again, while it would never be received without complaint, then you could at least, have people say, well, I like this character, I'm familiar with her, right? She was Bond's apprentice. I can accept it. You would at least have some people saying that, but of course that didn't happen. The funny thing is that this reminds me, as it often does, of a pro wrestling match, right? This was a long time ago, but there was this female wrestler known as Gail Kim, right? She was debuting on Raw, right? It was her first match on WWE Raw, which is the flagship show, right? She was pretty much unknown to the majority of the WWE audience. Some, long-time wrestleheads like me knew who she was and knew of her experience. But for the most part, especially for fans of Raw, right, they aren't going to know who she is. If you haven't been in the WWE, right, you haven't been anywhere. Is the perception of a lot of Raw fans, because they're more casual wrestling fans, right? You don't exist if you're not part of the WWE. So to them, she's new, she is sight unseen, and she's debuting on the flagship show. No problem there, right? That's common to have a debuting wrestler on the flagship show. The problem was that she was debuting in the women's world title match. And then on top of that, she won the title match. The entire crowd turned against her that night. You know why? Not because of Gail Kim. They didn't know who in the world Gail Kim was. They turned against her because they felt that the more experienced, well-known female wrestlers in the ring had been robbed, had been shafted of something that should be theirs from this newcomer upstart that no one knew. Right? There was no familiarity. They hadn't watched this woman debut and then have some matches and then become a contender and then the number one contender and then get a title match or anything. There had not been this growth or progression. She was debuting on Raw in a world title match, and then she wins it. It wasn't her fault, but again, because there was no history with the fans, there was no story between her and the fans, there was no growth, the fans turned on her. Was that fair? No, but that's what happened. This is what happens when you just randomly shoehorn someone in to a position that to the average viewer they didn't earn. Heck, I was mad about that, and I knew of Gail Kim, but my first thought was, honey, this is a WWE. You haven't earned that spot yet. And I think, again, many people are going to have a similar reaction to this new character, to this new 007, who, again, I think even if the character was a white man, right? Because despite what the media will tell you, it isn't about race, it isn't about gender. It's about shoehorning someone who is sight unseen into an iconic number, an iconic role that will forever belong to a different character. Right? Comics have been doing this for a few years now, right? Replacing their classic established male heroes and replacing them with characters who are not well known or who is not as well received. And fans have been absolutely livid because they don't want the poor man's version, right? They don't want the poor man's version of Wolverine or Hulk or Iron Man or whatnot. They want Wolverine, Hulk, Iron Man. Same thing here. People don't want the poor man's, or in this case, the poor woman's version of James Bond. They want James Bond. And even though Bond is eventually going to come back to take the number back from her, she isn't going to be in that role for the entire film. Is it still going to piss people off? Because guess what? She's still taking his place. She's still taking a place, a position, a number that she hasn't earned. She hasn't earned it in the fans' eyes. And that's going to, again, piss the fans off because she's just randomly 007. She hasn't earned it. So, as I was saying, yeah, I think had they introduced her earlier and let the fans get used to her, this would still be a bitter pill to swallow because really you can never replace James Bond. But I think, again, it would have helped if the fans had a connection to her. As it stands, they don't. They don't know her, and I think that's just making it that much harder, which is really unfair to the actress, to Miss Lynch. So there's a few items that I wanted to cover with this. Another one is that the two articles that I've read, one from the New York Post, I believe, and then one from the Daily Mail, which I think is the original article that revealed that Lashana Lynch is going to be playing 007 for a time in the film. It mentions that she's a beautiful black woman, right? It's mentioned two or three times, you know. Apparently there's going to be a scene in the film where M or somebody calls in 007, and, you know, a beautiful black woman's going to walk into the room. What I found irritating about this description was that, at least to me, it was actually very objectifying. I understand that the article was trying to make it sound like it's empowering. They were talking about it's a popcorn dropping moment. But to me, again, I found this to be objectifying because of the fact that it's literally reducing this character that Miss Lynch is playing to her appearance. She's beautiful. She's black. She's beautiful. She's black. The article, and I read the Daily Mail article and I read the New York Post one. Neither article mentions the character's name. Doesn't mention if she had a previous code name or designation. Doesn't explain to us, you know, or at least to the reader, what her skills are, what her talents are. We don't learn a thing about who she is as a person. Again, we don't even get her name. Right? All we know is that she's the new 007. Right? She's the new 007 and she's beautiful and she's black. It's like, way to be objectifying. Way to reduce her down to her appearance, right? Why aren't you telling us more than that? Right? It's just irritating. It's just irritating, especially when it's Hollywood that is constantly preaching to the common man, to the common woman to respect women. Yet they have articles like this that literally, in my opinion, disrespect the female character they are trying to promote by telling us absolutely bunk all about her, with the exception of she's beautiful, she's black. She's beautiful, she's black. Again, I have no issue with praising beauty. I have no issue with someone saying another person is attractive. But please, can we get something more about her? Please, right? If we're all supposed to be respecting women, shouldn't you also emphasize her other qualities? Is she intelligent? Is she crafty? Is she quick on her feet? Right? The whole thing is she's beautiful, and she's not going to immediately fall for James Bond's charms. First of all, that's been done before. That's at least been done in Tomorrow Never Dies, which is my favorite Bond film. Of the few I've seen, that's my favorite one because it's just fun. Right? The character of Wei Lin, who was played by Michelle Yeoh, her entire catchphrase throughout that entire film was, "Don't get any ideas, Mr. Bond." And what happened at the end? They're making out at the end of the film. Okay? Don't try to kid her, don't try to play a player, and don't try to pull the wool over my eyes, right? I see you. It's basically what I'm saying, right? Another thing is that I think that it probably would have been better for them to actually bring back a well-known female Bond counterpart, such as Wei Lin, or perhaps Jinx from Die Another Day, right, who was played by Halle Berry. Because again, those characters are part of the series. There'll be at least some fans that would be familiar with them. Michelle Yeoh and Halle Berry are well-known actresses. They're well-known for their accomplishments and feats in the action movie genre, right? So I think that would have been a good choice also, especially since nostalgia is in, to just, bring them back. Perhaps one of them could have been the one who talks James into coming out of retirement. Who knows? But there are so many what ifs. But ultimately, here's the way I see it. I kind of view this as a bait and switch. This actually kind of reminds me of when the Beauty and the Beast live-action movie came out in 2017. And right before the movie came out, Disney revealed that the live-action version of Le Fou was going to be gay, right? They did this because they wanted attention. Because guess what? I saw that film in live action. I spent $13 that I still regret to this day. And I saw that film in the Michael Johnson Theater in Harlem. Guess what? The gay moment that was so talked about and so controversial was Le Fou literally dancing for 2 seconds with another man. That was it. There was no big moment. There was no big realization. He had no real character arc. It was just him dancing with another guy. And for all of 2 seconds. And the most insulting thing was that this was when the theater, which had mostly been silent, right, throughout the film, has stood up and cheered. They stood up and cheered for literally 2 seconds of two men dancing with one another. It's this type of lowbrow, insulting pandering that sadly a lot of audiences, for whatever their reasons, perhaps a misguided sense of, hey, we're supporting something good, eat up. There was nothing to cheer for in that moment. For crying out loud, even in the moment, it's a sight gag. It was just irritating. But anyway, I think that's what similarly is going to happen with this, with Lashana Lynch's character, right? I don't think she's going to be Bond. Not Bond, I should say. I don't think she's going to be 007 for all that long. Right? I don't think that she's going to be 007 for all that long. Right? She'll be 007 for a lot less than you think. It wouldn't surprise me if she wasn't even in the film for 15 minutes, to be honest with you. Because to me, it's just a bait and switch. They drum up all this controversy, and then once you actually see the film, you realize that it's even less than a bit part. Right? That's the way That's what I'm anticipating. You'll never know until the film actually comes out and we see how much of a role her character plays, but I'm not expecting a terribly big role for the character. I'm not expecting her to play a big part in the film or to be a part of it for any significant amount of time. This, I believe, is done just to generate controversy. Because think about it. In years past, this type of reveal that 007 is a woman would have been saved for the film, right? They wouldn't have advertised that. They would have saved it for the film, and then film goers would have been talking about it amongst themselves, and word would have spread that way. But now, before the film even comes out, they want to advertise this. Why? Because they want to drum up attention, right? I have concerns. And again, it's nothing to do with the actress. But again, I think honestly that it probably would have been better for her to be a Bond girl. Oh, that's right. I was reading in the article that the scriptwriter or director or whomever, I forget, apparently is a feminist, right? And she has decreed that you can't use the term Bond girl anymore. Now it's Bond women. Oh please! It reminds me of when Joey Lawrence, who was an actor, is most famous for playing the pretty boy and pretty dumb boy brother on Blossom. And there came a point, as does in many young actors' careers, where he wanted to be taken more seriously, so he cut his hair, started dressing in a more mature style. In other words, started wearing dress clothes, and he started saying, "I'm not Joey Lawrence anymore. I'm Joseph Lawrence." Yeah, it didn't work. People still call him Joey Lawrence, right? Same way people will still refer to Bond girls as just that, Bond girls, right? I think it would have been better for her to actually be a Bond girl than it would have been for her to be 007, because the Bond girl is a role that is designated for a woman, right? And it's a role that many famous women have played. And guess what? The Bond girl isn't always, this helpless victim, against Bond. Again, there have been many Bond women, or Bond girls, I should say. Now I'm using the term. There have been many Bond girls, such as, again, Wei Lin, Jinx, and there's many others. There was Christmas Jones, that Lara Croft ripoff from The World Is Not Enough, right? Who are able to keep up with James, right? There's usually like two Bond, at least in the films I've seen. I can't speak for the entire franchise, but for the films I've seen, there's like two Bond girls, right? There's the one who's either villainous, or either the villainous, or she's involved with the villain of the film, right? Or she's sort of like a tragic figure herself, and she'll be the one that James sleeps with to get information out of, and then she'll die. And then there's the one who's like, firmly on the side of good, who's basically, able to keep up with James, right? And she'll be the one who lives, right? Because she's his ally, right? It makes a clear distinction, right? If you ally yourself with evil, James will seduce you and you'll die. But if you ally yourself with good, James will still seduce you, but you'll live, right? So there's that. So those are my thoughts on that. When they try to say, the series, always treats women poorly. I'm like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't always treat women poorly. I mean, what is it? Judi Dench played the role of M, who's the spy master, who's Bond's superior and a bit of a mother figure to him. She played her for years. There is Miss Moneypenny, right, who serves as mission control and helps Bond out. The Bond franchise, and again, I'm someone who's not terribly familiar with it, but I do know that it has featured a lot of strong, intelligent women in various roles. Sometimes there are female characters who actually get the jump on Bond or trick him or something. So it's not as if all the women are, played as just sex things or just played for fools. Again, there's this misunderstanding, I think, of the Bond franchise, by people who criticize it. And again, I'm not a big fan of it. Again, I've never liked the fact that James Bond is a womanizer, but I also understand that James Bond as a character is a power fantasy, right? He's the ultimate male, right? He's rich, he's strong, he's powerful, he's good looking, right? He saves the day. He gets the girl. He's charming. It would him not being able to charm a woman would be like Commander Shepard not being able to charm people and charm various characters and races in the Mass Effect games, right? It's part of the character and it's part of the power fantasy of the character, right? You're the strongest warrior. You're the best looking, right? You're the most charming, right? Everybody wants to be you or to get into bed with you. Like Commander Shepard, right? James Bond represents this, and guess what? Both men and women like this power fantasy. Those who like Bond because of the fact that he's a male power fantasy. And when you take that away by, again, putting a woman in his place, you've now broken the illusion and you've removed the male power fantasy element of it. And people don't want that. There are certain expectations of a Bond film, right? And when you start betraying and subverting those expectations, the fans are going to betray and subvert you, dear movie maker, by not going to see your film. Because you are not meeting their expectations. You are not meeting their demands, right? So there's that. Another thing is that the article mentions that the film is supposed to be about, or at least in part, about Bond existing in a Me Too world. And I think that's another big reason as to why this is happening, right? James Bond as a character, right, is too masculine, right? He's too masculine, he's too sexual, he's too, quote-unquote, toxic for a post-Me Too world where men, sadly, are made to live in fear of women. Let's be honest. If James Bond were real, he would be getting hit with sexual assault allegations left and right because he makes women drop the panties, right? He makes women fall at his feet and fall in his bed. I mean, it's not a perfect comparison, but look at the Vic Mignogna situation, right? A handsome, attractive man who's very charming, who's a hit with the ladies, is now having his sex life, basically, or at least his sex life as it was a decade or so ago, being used against him and being used as proof that he's is guilty of sexual misconduct and sexual assault. He had a wild and kinky sex life for a time, and he was a bad boyfriend. None of that is illegal, right? And again, Bond is a similar character, right? He's charming. Women like him. Women go to bed with him willingly. He's a well-known womanizer. You can't have that in a Me Too world, right? So what do? They need to I wouldn't necessarily say castrate him, because I think that would be going too far, but they need to, I guess, rein him in a way. And one of the ways to do this is to give a woman his designation, or rather to give anybody other than James Bond the 007 designation. Here's the thing, in the end, people are not going to accept it. People are not going to tolerate it. James Bond is James Bond. People like James Bond because he is James Bond. You cannot put another person as 007, regardless of gender, regardless of race. No one's ever going to buy anybody else but James Bond as 007. And to me, this is just another bait and switch to drum up attention, which I think in the end is really going to hurt the character that Lashana Lynch plays, and it's going to hurt her as an actress, because again, it's trying to take a poor man's version or a poor man or a poor woman's version in this place and stick them arbitrarily into a role traditionally held by a man. I think it was the Daily Mail article about this I was reading that was mentioning that she was going to wear, that Lashana Lynch's character is going to wear a safari suit that is based on and is similar in nature to a safari suit that was worn by another actor, I think back in the 80s, or when I think it said Roger Moore, but I forget. Again, who played Bond, right? So again, this isn't about her being her own character or even sort of a protege to Bond. This is about her again trying to be Bond to the point where she's now wearing a costume inspired by another version of James Bond, not inspired by any of the female characters, but by the male characters. Again, it's trying to put a woman who hasn't earned any place, right, and doesn't have her own name, doesn't have her own skills, trying to put her into a man's role, into a man's place, a man who is well known, who is beloved, who has earned his spot, trying to put her there and say, love me, I'm just as good, I'm just as worthy. No, you're not. But anyway, those are my very, very, very rambly thoughts that have gone on entirely too long. Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day, have a good night, whatever you're doing. Be safe, sane, consensual. Take care of yourself.